Hey, it's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another video. Today I wanted to talk about Office software. I've got a few friends out there in the world who are looking to move to more collaborative Office and cloud-based Office software. So Microsoft has had the monopoly on Office software for years, decades even. And don't get me wrong, Microsoft Office is an amazing suite of software. It's got a lot of capabilities, but there's a lot of stuff out there that has really come a long way in a long time. So I wanted to really kind of show you some options that you've got out there. So this will be the first of probably a few videos of different ways that you can run some Office software that's free and open source, and you can run it yourself on your own servers. Of course, the options that I'll show you also have opportunities to pay them to run it for you, and that supports the open source opportunities that others get. So if you're an IT professional and you're just like, I'm too busy to do this, I don't want to deal with something else I have to run, I get that. This is the way that you can do that, and you can have something really great and something open source, but you can have someone else run it and maintain it for you, and really you're just kind of in control of that from that perspective. So always keep that in mind if you're interested in seeing what's out there. But today I'm going to talk about OnlyOffice. OnlyOffice is really a nice suite of applications, so I want to kind of talk about all of it. It's not just a word processor and a spreadsheet and a presentation system, but it's got email, and it's got calendars, and it's got all kinds of other things that can be used with it. It also has the capability to be used with Nextcloud. So I've got a Nextcloud video out there that we've done in the past, and you've seen how great Nextcloud is as just a server for storing documents, but also for doing so much other stuff. I would really recommend looking into how OnlyOffice can kind of work with Nextcloud. I'm not going to show that today. I'm going to go through the a little bit more basic install where it's OnlyOffice kind of on its own. I am going to use Docker. So I really, if you're an IT professional, if you're somebody who's just interested in running your own software, if you're somebody who says, you know, I've got one server and it's decently beefy, you know, it's got 8 gigs of RAM or 16 gigs of RAM or you know, 64 gigs of RAM or whatever you've got, and you're like, I want to run a bunch of these things on one server, you can do that, and Docker makes that so much easier for you that I really suggest getting out there and learning a little bit more about Docker. Find online tutorials that go through what Docker is. I might put a few together myself eventually. I don't want to get off the topics that I'm covering right now, which is open source software in and of itself, but I do want to provide you the tools that you need to be successful at this at the same time, so I'll keep that in mind for future. But Docker is great, and we're going to use Docker today, and OnlyOffice has a pretty nice script set up. So if you go to, and I'll put this link in the description, but if you go to this link, they've actually got a little video, and they've got system requirements that tell you kind of here's what we expect you to have at a minimum in order to run this thing. Now, they say they're expecting 6 gigs of RAM. I'm going to install this on a DigitalOcean droplet that's only got 2 gigs of RAM. It runs. It's a little bit slow to load pages and things like that. So I imagine they're saying, hey, you know, load this up with 6 gigs so that it can load things a little bit faster. So keep that in mind when you go out there to install this yourself. If you're installing it locally and you've got a pretty good machine, you know, this is the resources that they're looking for. It does run on the 2 gig version of DigitalOcean. It's also an SSD. It's not a spinning drive, so that helps a little bit as well. But they're kind of telling you, here's what we're looking for, you know, as far as minimal kind of requirements there. The Community Edition, which is their open source edition that anybody can get, and they have a nice little script right here, so you can kind of actually go and look at this script and see what it's doing. And so they're saying, you know, do wget, and that's going to download this script. You know, the next thing they tell you is here's how you run the script, and here are some parameters that you can run with the script. And one thing that you want to have set up is your domain. So I tried this the first time, and I set up my domain, and I set it for 5 minutes. And it kept telling me that the domain and the IP weren't associated. I think that's more about the time that it had to permeate through all of the domain servers out there. So I was able to get to that server very easily with SSH. So it had been long enough for me to access it, but for whatever reason, this script, when it would check, would say this domain that you have set up is not right. Now it's trying to set this up as a mail server, so doing it as a subdomain, which is something else I did, might have been part of my mistake. So I may try this again and not do it with the subdomain, and we'll see how it goes. There are other options down here, so if you don't want to do that with a mail server, you already have your own mail server, things like that, you don't have to do that, but it will try to set up a mail server for you if you do set it up that way. You can tell it what DNS to use, so there's lots of options to kind of look through here. We're just going to do that first one. So first thing we're going to do is go set up our DigitalOcean droplet. So we'll go over to DigitalOcean. I'm going to do create droplet, and I'll just click on droplet here, and I need a droplet with Docker installed on it. So I can either go install Docker myself, or I can jump over here to the marketplace and I can say I just want one with Docker on it. So I pick Docker, and I'm going to move down. I'm going to leave it on standard, and I'm going to jump over here to the $10. You know what? Since I did $10 before and it was a little bit light, let's try $15. I'll just try it just to see how it goes. We'll leave it on the setting that it picked by default here. I'll set up my SSH keys that I want to use. And then we will set this with So I'm going to set this with the subdomain that I intend to set up for the IP address, and then I'm just going to click on create. So we'll let that get itself kind of set up as an image, and I'm going to jump over here to hover, and I will add a subdomain, and that is, and then I will go grab that IP address. We'll set this to 5 minutes. And as soon as this gets done creating our drive here, we'll go grab the IP address and we will attach that to our subdomain. Alright, we're going to grab our IP address now that we've got that droplet created. We're going to jump over here and paste that in. And that thing's running. So we gave it a 5-minute time frame. We'll see how it goes. What we can do now is just bring up our terminal. And first we can just SSH root at, and we can just paste in that IP address so that we can get in there and do our normal stuff. And again, I'm always too quick. It's not actually quite done setting itself up. We'll give it a few seconds and we'll just try again. There it goes. And as always, we want to update and do the upgrade on the system before we do anything else, just to give it a chance to get all of the updates and pull down all the latest information that we want, all the latest updates for the system. As always, whenever you come up to this prompt, just hit tab so that it highlights the OK, and then hit enter. You may get it a second time. If you do the same exact thing, you just press the tab key to highlight the OK button and press enter. Alright, once it's done updating, we want to just go ahead and reboot. That'll boot us off the server. It'll reboot. It takes about 20 seconds usually. When we log back in, we'll go ahead and log in using our subdomain that we set up earlier. Okay, we're logged back into our server. We're going to go grab this command so that we can download the script. We're going to copy that command and then we're going to paste it in. So in Linux or in Bash, you do Control-Shift-V, like Victor, in order to paste. And then this will download that script. We can look at that script by using cat and the name of the script, and it will put that out into the terminal, and you can scroll to see all of the things that they're doing. This is a good way for you to just kind of check what's happening. It's also a good way to learn a few things about Bash scripting. Once you're comfortable with what they're doing, we want to go get the next part, which is how to run the script. And we're going to do this one here, and we're going to try to set up our mail server by running it this way. So again, we'll copy, go back to our terminal, and we're going to paste it in using the same hotkey, Control Shift and V like Victor. Now right here we've got to change this because it's not yourdomain.com, it's opensourceisawesome.com. I don't know if this will work because opensourceisawesome.com is not associated strictly with this IP address. This is a subdomain of opensourceisawesome.com, so we'll have to see what happens here. Right off the bat, it's going to warn us that this is for running Docker install, and we need to hit Y if that's what we want. If we don't and we hit N, it'll try to install the Debian package or the RPM package. If you do that, it's not going to do the mail server setup. You have to do that separately and then link it to your OnlyOffice install. So it's just kind of giving you that warning. So we're going to do Y because we want the Docker install, and we're going to hit enter. So it's telling us exactly what I was afraid of, which is opensourceisawesome.com is not linked to that IP address. So I'm going to try this one more time. I'm going to put the OnlyOffice subdomain in front of it. I still don't know if it's going to work, but we'll give it a shot here. And it gives us the same message that part's not going to work. So we can do this without that, which is fine. I could just go set up my OnlyOffice. Here, I'll just do that. I'm going to go to hover. I'm going to change this star entry to be that IP address for OnlyOffice. So we'll grab that IP address, we'll copy it, we'll edit, and we'll paste, and we'll tell it 5 minutes. So I'll give that a few minutes to kind of get propagated through the systems, and then we'll come back and we'll just try this again and see if it works for us. Okay, so first thing is I need to make a correction. I said we should change the asterisk entry for our domain, and that was incorrect. I don't know what I was thinking. I turned that back to what it was. What we want to change is the @ record here, so that it's pointing to the same server as our OnlyOffice subdomain. In order to get opensourceisawesome.com to be right. Now, if you have a site that you're already kind of running something on and it's pointed to a different server and you try to install OnlyOffice as a subdomain, you don't want to change this for sure. So make sure you don't change this setting. This is not something you want to do, changing this @ because then it's not going to point to your main domain anymore if you have a different site or different page running on a different server for that domain. So just be aware of that. The star here says anything that comes in needs to look here at hover and then figure out where it needs to go. So don't change that one if you have a star record unless you kind of know what you're doing. But in my case, I need to actually have this set up as the @ for the server that I want to point to. So I apologize for the miscommunication previously, but I wanted to kind of get that straight with you guys. Alright, so I've changed that back. I'm going to give it a few more minutes and we'll see if it'll work. So the way to check whether your registration has been updated is to do a ping for your main domain, and it'll give you back the IP address that it's pinging currently. So right now it's pinging back to the hover domain. We eventually want it to ping to our new server address. So this is a simple way for me to check and see if it's actually up and ready before I try to log into it. Okay, now we're getting the ping to the correct address that I want, so I'm going to SSH back into that server. And we'll try that actual address. And we are in. So I'm going to use this same method. So if I do ls, I should have my install script there, and I do. So I'm going to go back to their instructions here. And we will just copy this command again. Paste it in, and of course change this to our domain. And let's run it and see what happens. We're going to tell it yes for Docker. Alright, it's going to pull down the Docker images that it needs, and then it's going to go ahead and extract those and start the installation process. And it pulls down a few different images, so the script is really nice because they're doing a lot of the work for you that you would be doing in the terminal for the Docker install. So they're actually pulling down a few different images that they use in order to make this work. And then they're doing the linking in the background through the script, which is great. So if you want to understand a little bit more about Docker and how they're doing that, you can read through that script and kind of see what they're doing. Alright, that took a little while, but it does pull down multiple images, and if you were watching the sizes on those things, you can see that there's several gigs of data that it pulls down and extracts and starts running. So down here at the bottom it tells you, you should be able to go to your site now. If you have questions, there's support at onlyoffice.com. You can visit different places to get information about that. So what we're going to do is go up here and open another tab, and we will go to our site. So I like this because they give you a page that says, hey, it's not quite ready yet. We're loading things up. Just give us a few minutes, and it lets you know that it's getting ready. While we're waiting for that to get started there in the background, one of the things you can do is Docker PS, and this will show you all of the running Docker containers. So here you can kind of see everything that it's set up and installed, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger just to try to make the spacing a little nicer there. So you can see kind of what it gives you, and here's the names. They're actually on the second row. So if you're reading this, the top row gives you the information here on the first row, and then the second row, information on the second row, of course. So the names are OnlyOffice Community Server, OnlyOffice Mail Server, OnlyOffice Document Server, and OnlyOffice MySQL Server. So it actually goes and grabs several different images and sets those up to run together in different Docker containers. And it starts those Docker containers, and then it gets everything ready, and then you'll be able to log in. It does take several minutes for this thing to run through the startup, so be patient. It'll let you know when it's ready, and then you can continue on with setup and installation and configuration, and I'll go through that here in just a minute when it's done. Okay, after it gets finished doing the setup, which that probably took 5 or 6 minutes, this is the page you're going to be brought to. So as the first person that's going into the portal, they want you to set your password. So please make sure to set a strong password. And then next you can say, you know, your portal is registered from the following email. Let's do onlyoffice.open. I don't know what they're going to set up for my email, so I'll just do this one because I know what's going to happen. It gives you a little key here, your language and time zone settings. So if you don't have that set correctly, go ahead and change that to what it should be. I'm going to be America. It should be UTC minus, maybe I went the wrong direction. Yeah, it should be -6 Central Time for me. So you should set it to whatever yours is. And I'm looking. Here we go, America, Chicago. That's normally the one that I use. So here, if you don't mind sending anonymous data to OnlyOffice, that's fine. This isn't going to be a server I keep, so I'm going to uncheck this. And then by checking this box, I accept terms. Okay, so we're going to hit continue. Oh, I didn't type my password in the same both times. Let's see. There we go. Once you get your password to match, it should go on to the next step. Okay, after a little snafu and a reboot, I got back into the system, and it brings you up to kind of this starting page. So we're at the documents area, and if you look down here, you can see projects. So you can actually run projects from inside of OnlyOffice. CRM, so customer relationship management, so you can set up contacts, have information, notes, things like that, so that you can keep in contact with your customers and keep an eye on what's going on with them. And you can see success metrics, things like that through here a little bit. There's mail. We'll click on that here in a minute and see what it's got for us. People, again, this is people within your organization. And, oops, I clicked on that by accident. Let me see if I can get back to that. Yeah, there we go. And community. So it has a bit of a social aspect as well, where there's some chat and things like that built in. So if you have an organization that's been looking for a solution that would bring your groups together, that's not quite as disparate as having a separate email and a separate chat and a separate Office application where you're emailing documents back and forth and things like that, this really is kind of a nice solution. When you start to look at it, one of the things that you'll notice is that when you create online documents, you have options to share those things with certain people, and then you can give them permission. So if you've ever used Microsoft Office 365, the online version, you have similar things. You can do the same kind of thing kind of through OneDrive. Of course, you can do that through Dropbox or Nextcloud or any of those things as well, where you're sharing things out. It's really a very nice solution here, and it's all kind of packaged up into one place, which is really cool. So before we get too much into the user side of it, I kind of want to look at the settings and go through a few things that are out here. I'm going to kind of make this a little bit smaller just so it fits better onto the screen here. And you can see up here, administrator. So you can go adjust your profile as the administrator. So you'll see it spins up here in the corner on this tab. It does take a little longer. Again, we're running this on a server that it wasn't meant to be run on. But people can go and adjust their own profiles. They can put in their photo. Of course, here's the email that's got associated with me and things like that. So from here, you can invite users to this portal. So if you have a group of users, you can start sending out invites to get those users to start using the portal. And then you have access to the settings here. You also have access to the settings up here in the upper right side of the screen. So you can set up feeds, you can do searching, you have mail access, chat access, and calendar access from up here at the top. So if we just kind of click on settings, so here you can do portal access rights settings. So we'll let that load up. So in here for this user, you can go through and set up what access they have. As an administrator, of course, you would expect that you have access to everything, but for different users, you can go and set up as the administrator their access to these things. Now they have predefined roles that you can set for these different users that will kind of give them access to the things that they need to have in the first place. So that makes it a little bit easier. You don't have to actually go through and set everything individually, but you can if you need to. So there are some integrations, and you can go here and look at third-party services. And I'm probably going to speed up the loading process just so you're not sitting and waiting while we're doing a video. But I understand it does take several seconds for it to load each of these pages, so be aware of that. So there's DocuSign. You can get DocuSign set up. Dropbox. There's Box. There's OneDrive. There's Facebook. There's Google. There's Twitter. There's LinkedIn. There's Twilio. So if you're doing some kind of messaging out through SMS or other kinds of messaging that Twilio offers. Clickatel, I'm not familiar with. Firebase is a database system. SMS messaging system. Bitly for doing URL shortening. Yahoo. WordPress. I mean, just there's a really nice list of different options here that you have for third-party resources. Your document service, so once this loads up, we'll kind of look at what the document service offers. So the document service editing address, I wouldn't mess with most of these things, honestly. I would just kind of keep it where it is unless you really know what you're doing here. When we bring up mail server, here's the connection settings. So it's setting itself to a mail server IP address. You can show the advanced settings if you want to. SMTP settings, so these will be the settings for sending out email. So here are the SMTP settings that it set up whenever it created the Docker instances for us. So again, I wouldn't mess with this. It's probably something to make note of if you need to use this for a different application. You have statistics that you can check out. You can see that it's pretty low, but there is something here where you can see statistics about the system and what's going on with it. So storage space used is only 17 megabytes right now. So as this grows, you can kind of keep an eye on that and see, do you need to expand your storage space or put some extra storage in, usage graphs, things like that. So you can also attach Google Analytics if you really want to see something like that. So I'm going to click on the settings button here. So up here at the top, you can see language, time zone settings. These are things that we set up when we first set up the system. So welcome page settings, you can change what the welcome page says. So right now it's titled Web Office. You could change this to whatever your organization name is, Office. DNS settings, if you'd prefer that it use specific DNS, you can set that here. You can rename the portal. You can have team templates. So again, this is kind of how your team template permissions go. You can set up different color themes, and it's pretty easy. I mean, when you click, you can see what it does. It basically changes the color themes a little bit. I'm fine with the orange. It doesn't look bad. And then, of course, when you get done with making any changes, you would click Save. As we move down here, we'll go to Module Tools. So here it shows the different modules that you have installed and that you have enabled. So one of the things you see here is events, blogs, bookmarks, but you don't have forums, and you don't have wiki, and you don't have you don't have forums, and you don't have wiki. So you can check those things if you want to add those things to your system and see what they look like. They might be something useful for your organization. It just depends. You know, a wiki is a great place in an organization to keep documentation for all kinds of things that are internal type information things. So this is maybe one that you would want to have. Forums, you know, depending on what kind of interactions you're trying to get going with your group, that could be useful. But I find that the chat options that are out there today are much better. Mattermost, Rocket Chat, the chat possibly built into this may have the same kind of functionality. So something to keep in mind. Custom navigation, so you can set up custom navigation from inside of OnlyOffice to go to different locations. And then you can set up your default start page. So if you don't like the one that it came to initially, you can change it to be one of these others, just depending on what you're needing. So we start talking about security. You start talking about access to the system. And you'll notice up here right now, I'm not running this with any kind of Let's Encrypt security or certificates. So that's kind of an important thing, and you may want to get that set up. So password strength settings, you can say, you know, I don't like that. I want our passwords to have to be 12 characters, and I want them to have to do all of this stuff. And once you save that, that's going to enforce that for new users coming into the system, and it may force you to change your password. So be aware, you do have those settings that you can make those changes on. Two-factor authentication, as always, is a good idea. I love authenticator applications. The SMS is fine. This is starting to become a no-no because it's become pretty easy for people to hack and get a hold of your SMS messages to authenticate themselves with second factor. So if they offer the authentication option with an app, it's better in my opinion today. Trusted email domain settings. So again, you can go through here and kind of check those out and set those up. Add users as guests. You can allow this. Just depends on your organization. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not, depending on what your organization does. Okay, so so the IP security is basically a whitelist, blacklist of IP addresses that people can log into the portal from. So if you have an internal network that you want them to be able to access this from only, then you can set up that IP address and range for that internal network, and then that way it keeps people from getting in from outside the network. Administrator message settings, so you can enable and disable this, and I believe this is going to be so this allows the users to contact the portal administrator, and basically it puts your contact information in a place where they can find it. And then session lifetime, so you can set the session lifetime so that it doesn't expire too quickly for your users. So a lot of good settings there. Once we get down here to access rights, we'll kind of see what else is available. So if you ever need to change the portal owner, you do have that opportunity here. You can change the portal owner by picking the user's name and then changing the owner. So administrators, you can set up more administrators, of course, projects, CRM. So you can change, you know, which users, which groups have access to these things. So you can set up a list, or you can just say all users have access. We already went through integrations and SMTP settings and statistics. So now let's go back and let's look at email, because that one's interesting to me. I've shown how to set up mail in a box in the past for email, and I use that today for my email. If this actually set up an email where it can be used pretty easily just by running that Docker command, then that's pretty awesome. So let's see what we've got here. We've got the mail server, we've got accounts, we've got tags, and we've got CRM integration. So let's add a new account, add a mail account. So let's just call this Brian at opensourcesawesome.com, and we'll give me a password here. Account connection error. Please check all the account settings you entered. If you're sure your settings are correct, sign in to the mail service you use and confirm. Interesting. This is interesting. It whenever you type in an email address, it just takes whatever you type in for the domain, and it goes and kind of just sets that as, hey, here's what it looks like this should be for the defaults. It actually had pop here. I changed it to IMAP. So I don't think any of these are correct. I don't know that it actually set up any kind of mail server that it's going to let us have access to. So let me cancel out of this for a minute. We'll go back to settings, and let's go look at those mail server settings again. Okay, yeah, so if we read right here, it says, once it becomes available, you can set up mail accounts, basically, for the users inside of the portal, and you can use your own mail domain name. So I would have to have my own mail domain set up first, which I do, but it's not something that the OnlyOffice system is setting up for us. So it's okay. It's just not something that they're setting up for us. Now, it does have SMTP set up, I guess, so that it can send mails out from the server. We can click on that and kind of look at it again and see what it looks like, but this is not doing like an incoming mail service or anything. And that makes sense, because when you do a mail server, there's some extra things you need to set up on the actual domain name service. So back over in Hover, that I would need to go set some special records that help identify my domain and my email as valid, so that it doesn't get sent to spam automatically. Yeah, so this looks like it's actually setting up basically custom mail sending capabilities. It's not actually going to use the mail server that I set up unless I go in here and change it and tell it what those settings are. So again, if I went and set up mail in a box and I had my own OpenOffice, or opensourcesawesome.com in this case, mail server, then I could change that right here, and then I could go set up those settings from my mail in a box, and it would send out through that service instead. Now, they are warning you that if you use Gmail, you'll have to do some special things to get that to be able to send, and it's just because Google's trying to protect you and make sure that people aren't hacking your account and sending out spam through your account, but be aware of that. So that's cool. So if I did go back and I said, mail, I want to set up a new account, it's just going to be pulling in my Fixit Del Rio account stuff right now, because that's the email that I use. So be aware that it is asking for that information. So the feed here is interesting, right? So view your team members, work with DocX, XLSX. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. Let's go to community CRM projects. Let's just click on projects. And no projects have been added, so we can create a new project. So I tried to run the OnlyOffice online version using DigitalOcean, using the 3 GB droplet, and it just couldn't handle it. So their minimum specs look to be pretty accurate, and they are probably minimum specs. I would say if you could run that on something a little bit beefier, you could probably have a good experience, but I just had a hard time. My server finally just kind of crapped out, and it just would not run everything that needed to run. So Elasticsearch is pretty heavy, so it's running one of those in the background. MySQL isn't that bad, but then the OnlyOffice stuff itself looked to be pretty heavy, so it was having a really hard time to load those things up. I do want to mention that you don't have to run OnlyOffice on a server. They do have desktop versions as well. So they have desktop editions here for Windows, Linux, or Mac OS, and a lot of times when you say Linux, Unix gets kind of included in that by default. So there are installers if you want to go and check that out. So here's the Mac OS, and if you want any kind of version for Debian, Ubuntu, different kinds of servers, here's the versions that you here's the versions that you need to look at. So if you're looking for Snap package, that's a really nice, easy way to install things. RPM packages, of course, and then there are the Debian packages if you just have straight up Debs. So if we click on the Snap package, there's also AppImage and tar.gz packages. So if you prefer AppImage or tar.gz, you can go get those too. So once I say install from the Snap store here, we'll see what happens. It's going to come up, it's going to prompt me, and it's going to give me a command that I need to run. So this is still just not my favorite part about Linux, because when I try to convince people to move from Windows to Linux, I want to be able to tell them you don't have to go into the terminal anymore. But here we are getting a terminal command. I have the software repository installed. So let's see. Let's just check it and see if it has OnlyOffice in here somewhere, because I believe this installs from snaps now. And there's OnlyOffice. So here's this desktop editor. And what version is this going to be? I don't know yet. 5.4.1. What are they saying it is back here? 5.4.1. So I don't know why they don't just prompt me to open up the software installer, the software store, and do it this way. This is the better experience for any person that's an end user who's coming from Windows, who doesn't know that the command line exists, probably. So this is a really nice graphical way to install software. So we'll let this thing go, and then I'll kind of open it up and show you guys what that looks like. All right, it's now installed. So I'm going to close down the software store here. So I want to show you what Word looks like here. Whenever you bring it up, this is what I have to use for work. So you can see it has a pretty similar look to what you get with Word. Kind of a minimized, what I call ribbon bar up here, but as you click across, you get different things that you can do. So if I go into OnlyOffice, so right off the bat, you get kind of this start page, a little bit pretty similar to what you get with LibreOffice, which we can start as well. So if you just open up the generic LibreOffice, you can see all of the documents and things that you have, and you get kind of this start page where you can click on, I want to do documents, I want to do spreadsheets, I want to do whatever it is. So very similar to what we're seeing here with OnlyOffice. So in this case, if I say document, so I get the feel that this is opening up something in a browser background. Maybe I'm wrong, but if you look at this, and then you look at what I've got with Microsoft Office here in the background, I mean, they look super similar. This is something that should be a very easy transition for anybody coming from Microsoft Office to use something that's open source and something that's free. This just is very, very simple. It doesn't strike me as anything difficult to use. And this is the desktop version. This is the same thing you would get in the browser version, so I'm not sure if this is actually running like a little server and it's bringing up the browser version in the background and using local storage instead. But I mean, pretty simple, pretty basic. So no, I don't want to do that. But if we go back here, so I've got a document open. Now I can open up a spreadsheet. And you're going to see it looks very much like Excel whenever you do this. In fact, it's almost identical to Excel or LibreCalc, depending on what you've used in the past. And then if I do a presentation, this is going to look very much like PowerPoint. It's got coloring up here at the top. I mean, it's just really, really so similar. It's not funny. This is just straight simple. So you have recent files, open local files, and you can connect to the cloud. So if you're using OnlyOffice in the cloud, or you have a Nextcloud instance, or you have an OwnCloud instance going, you can actually just connect up your local version to those cloud instances and use that as storage for the back end and communication, things like that. So it's a nice system, a nice ecosystem of software overall. Again, if you're going to run the server, you really need to make sure you've got a server that's got those minimum specs and probably a little bit better than that. But I really like OnlyOffice. I think it's a great option and a great piece of software. So if you're interested in something for Office and you need Office, or you have somebody who's asking you, hey, I want to switch off of Windows 7 and I'm really not wanting to go to Windows 10. If Office is their holdup, I think OnlyOffice, LibreOffice, those are amazing alternatives today. And I hate the word alternative because it makes it sound like you're making a trade for something less, and you're not. They're great options. I think Word is an option. I think LibreOffice is a great option. OnlyOffice is a great option. So if you like OnlyOffice, get out there, give it a try. Let me know what you think in the comments, and please like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time.